Welcome to A Stranger, a Suitcase and a Story. I'm Anton van Melbourne. This is a podcast about starting over. It is about what it takes to leave the familiar behind and the courage it takes to begin again in a land that isn't yet home. Together with my co-host Ben Liebenberg, we explore the untold stories of migration. Not just where people went, but why they left, what they held on to, and what they've had to let go. Each episode, we sit down with someone who's made that leap. Someone who's left behind not just places, but languages, careers, communities, and sometimes even parts of themselves. They share what called them forward, what nearly held them back, and what they've come to understand about identity, belonging, and starting again. Produced in partnership with Southern Crossings, a community for South Africans forging new lives in Australia, this podcast is a place to feel seen, heard, and understood. Because this isn't just about visas or paperwork. It's about identity, loss, hope, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild a life piece by piece. So wherever you are on your journey, arriving, settling, or still thinking about it, welcome. This is where stories connect us all.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This information to customers travelling on the Land Airways flight LA 800 approach Denver, Qantas 321, service to Auckland and Santiago. If you desire to
Welcome to another episode of A Stranger, a Suitcase and a Story, and this is episode number 24. Hi Ben, how you doing? My co-host here.
Hello, Anton. Very well, thanks yourself.
Yeah, very well. You'll see the picture behind me, right? I mean, it's not by accident. Usually I have a ship behind me, but this time I've got a cheetah here, and the reason for that is that we've got a special guest here that I think is so involved in wildlife. So our guest is Dr. Jennifer Gray, AM, and I think if we can call you Jenny from here on, it's probably much easier. So Jenny grew up in South Africa between Johannesburg and Durban, places that shaped both her curiosity about the world and a love for storytelling. She still talks about sitting around a fire, spinning stories, and how these moments taught her the power of connection and meaning. Her move to Australia came through a combination of work and life, an opportunity to lead Werribee Open Range Zoo, and a relationship that anchored her future here. She now calls Melbourne home. Like many migrants, Jenny noticed the contrast quickly, the everyday things people take for granted, from public transport to safety, and the unexpected details of the natural world. Birds everywhere while animals remain hidden. Finding her feet came through building a network of like-minded people, having family nearby, and importantly, the value of coaching early in a transition, helping her navigate change with intention rather than force. Jenny is now the Chief Executive Officer of Zoos Victoria, responsible for Melbourne Zoo, Healesville Sanctuary, Kyabram Fauna Park, and Werribee Open Range Zoo. Over the past decade, she has led Zoos Victoria transformation into a zoo-based conservation organization focused on fighting extinction and creating a future rich in wildlife, working closely with 27 critically endangered species and engaging over 2.8 million visitors with some 360,000 members. What makes Jenny's leadership distinctive is the depth behind it. With formal training in civil and transportation engineering, business administration and ethics, and a PhD in ethics, she brings systems thinking, moral clarity, and a practical rigor to some of the most complex conservation challenges we face. She's also the author of Zoo Ethics, a book that explores how we make ethical decisions about animals in the wildlife in human care. This is a conversation about migration, leadership, and ethics, and what really means to care for the natural world. Not just in theory, but in practice. So welcome, Jenny. Really, really happy to have you on the podcast. It's a big introduction, but it's a fantastic trajectory your career has followed so far.
Thank you, Anton. I'm feeling like I should take you everywhere with me because you did such a lovely summary there of a very long and varied career.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Jenny, we try and get people on the podcast. Obviously, that have migrated. I mean, that's why it's here. But also the importance of, when you come across or why you come across and all the difficulties, things, and some of that we will definitely talk about because we're so interested. But I think what makes this podcast so nice, Ben, is that it's the first time that we have somebody in a podcast that we're going to talk about wildlife and things like that. For me, that's personally, it was so different coming to Australia, right? I mean, you're right, Jenny. I mean, when I came to Australia, sorry, I'm not on the soapbox here, but when I came to Australia, because I'm an avid photographer, the only thing I could take photos of really was birds. I mean, fantastic birds, but I couldn't, animals were just like not there.
It is interesting because as South Africans, you grow up surrounded by animals. It's almost, I mean, what a privilege. We would go to a game reserve and you drive through the gate and it's like, oh no, just another 100 impala, and baboons. And, it just felt wherever you went, spending time in Durban, there's vervets running around your backyard. It just, this immersion in animals felt natural all the time.
Yeah.
And you come here and the first species we worked with, they run at a density of 1 per hectare and they're about that big. And so like in the space that you could have kept 400 impala, you've got 5 of these animals running around. And it just was, it's an ancient continent with very weak soils and very challenging environments for mammals to be in. So they have this great diversity of birds and this great diversity of reptiles and insects, but so different from where we all grew up and the privilege of growing up in South Africa, I guess.
Yeah, and I want to, sorry, Ben, I just want to get this piece in because it's such a lovely segue. Jenny, every episode that we have, we create a what we call a suitcase moment, and that's something that we try and connect some historical event or some really important event with our guest that, in your case, again, happened a long, long time ago, and this, and I'm also putting myself out here. So on 15 January 1859, which is like 160 years ago, Ferdinand von Mueller, Honorary Secretary of Melbourne Botanical and Zoological Garden, forwarded to Dr. Thomas Embling, MLA, a Cape Town offer from Colonial Secretary R.W. Rawson, writing for Governor Sir George Grey, but that's spelled E-Y. So Grey offered to present live South African animals to Victoria. And in the letter, which you can read, it says that for the advantage and gratification of the inhabitants of that colony, Victoria covered shipping and reception. So the steamer Prince Alfred was named for the reply, and the proposed list reads like I guess a 19th century wish list: ostrich, eland, kudu, quagga, bontebok, blesbok, wildebeest, Reebok and Dacre, and so the full text was printed by order of the Legislative Assembly in a paper trail that shows exactly how Cape Town crates fed Melbourne's early menagerie. That sits squarely in the acclimatization era, because that era in society in Victoria was famous for the motto, if it lives, we want it. So it went on to manage Melbourne's zoological gardens, embodying a 19th century belief that importing exotic species would improve the colony. But fast forward and the philosophy flips. So Jenny, Zoos Victoria's mission today is explicit. We will fight wildlife extinction. And delivered through targeted breeding and recovery programs, research and field partnership. It's a wildlife conservation master plan, sets a strategy, and the organization currently focuses on dozens of locally threatened species. In other words, it's really from importing spectacle for gratification to protecting species for the survival, right?
Absolutely. And it feels like that story of being the acclimation society is almost the legacy we have to undo. because it is these
Yes.
introduced species of rabbits and cats and foxes and toads that actually are destroying the native wildlife. So it is just such an interesting history that we started out in one direction and have changed completely. And maybe it's a story of redemption and one that we will always be trying to catch up with.
Yeah, and I wanted to, when I found the story and I looked for it, and to me, it was so, and there's so many things, but this is one, you sit with this issue so many years later, and so many other places in Australia, we have some of these problems, but at the same time, it gives a huge opportunity, right?
Oh,
To set it right and do that sort of
I
thing.
had years ago, I had a very funny conversation with an American colleague of mine talking about these critically endangered species and what we were doing, and it's incredible work, and my team are just so amazing. And after a while of talking to him about this mission of not letting any species go extinct on our watch and the incredible work we're doing with 27 critically endangered species, he turned to me and went, "Oh, Jenny, you're so lucky. You have so many endangered species to save."
Well, that's another way of looking at it, right?
Yeah, it would
Yeah.
be really nice if we didn't. But yeah, it is the kind of cutting edge of some of the conservation work that we end up doing here.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask, my co-host Ben, to talk a little bit about, if we can kind of rewind a bit, but the thing that's going to be really interesting for us to understand, especially after, you started going to university, you went through so many different things, right? You were transport CEO, and then you went to become a deputy DG in South Africa, and then you went to Airlink, and then you went to FNB, and only after that you ended up in a zoo in Johannesburg before you went to Victoria. But Ben, maybe we want to explore a little bit. Jenny grew up in Johannesburg and Durban, and so tell us a little bit about that, Ben.
Well, let me rather ask, but you can obviously tell Jenny that Anton today is a bit like a kid in a candy shop. This is up his alley, something he's really passionate about. He loves it. He does photography, brought out a few books, and he always uses wildlife photography as a way to connect leadership and those kind of things. So yeah, if it's up to him, we'll just talk about animals all day and that kind of thing. But we're obviously also interested about you as a person. So tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up, obviously in Joburg, and when did you move to Durban, and a little bit about your early days, your primary school days, and your family. It was a big family, small family. How did you grow up, and what do you remember about it?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I can spend all day on animals as well, so you'll have to be the voice of reason that just kind of brings that back. I had such a fantastic childhood. I grew up in the leafy suburbs of Joburg's northern suburbs in Craighall. Went to Craighall Park Primary, literally walked to school every day and walked home again. Um, High school was Hyde Park High, so public schooling the whole way through, and really just such opportunities of a really great education just down the road, friends that you could walk to after school. Um, Grew up with a brother and sister. I'm the middle child, so older sister, younger brother. My dad was a civil engineer as well, and so we lived a great, very stable life. Of course, understanding that there were changes and things happening in South Africa. I went to Wits University through the 80s, where there was quite a lot of change coming through, and starting to understand that we had to change as a nation. Having the opportunity to study engineering really it's one of those careers that help you think. And so I'm always intrigued of all the people that study civil engineering with me. Maybe about a third to half the class still does something that could be called engineering. I'm a professional registered engineer, but I would be dangerous. I wouldn't let me design anything at all these days, except maybe an org structure or a conservation program. But then had this sort of early career as South Africa was changing so fast, and it opened opportunity the more people left. Being a young graduate coming up through late 80s, there was just opportunity everywhere for anyone, able to reach out and grab those kind of opportunities. So I studied a lot. I worked a lot. When Anton reads off my CV, I often tell people I just have a short attention span. And I finally found a career in zoos where every hour we're dealing with something different. My curiosity was always being tested because I could learn more about cheetahs or learn more about some species. And so had these really incredible moments where at a really young age I was put into leadership positions, particularly as South Africa was changing. So I took over Durban Transport as we had the elections in 94. The fact that we had segregated bus services was never going to last, and so was able to lead the change of combining the segregated bus services into a single service for the community of Durban. We just, it was such a privilege to be able to work right across the spectrum. I spent a lot of time in Umlazi, in KwaMashu. I knew the guys, I knew the bus routes. I think I was just the craziest white woman most people had ever seen because I was out with the early morning buses in the townships, but it was all about helping people get their days done, making sure that people's lives move and get better. And so managed to move down to Durban. That was for the change to move to Durban Transport. And then after 4 or 5 years, moved to KwaZulu Transport Department, which was another incredible opportunity working for directly the cabinet and the Minister of Transport, so committed to change and bringing opportunity into people's lives and just working with people. It's really hard when we see politicians through the TV. We don't get to know those people and what their passions are and what drives them to do what's a really hard job. We get to get sound bites and get to form opinions. And so that was another incredibly privileged opportunity of working out in rural regional areas of KwaZulu-Natal and
But
areas
let me
that
take you.
But yeah, sorry,
Sorry,
Anton,
Jenny.
I can talk.
I think that I was also during that time in Durban. Your first stint in Durban Transport as the CEO, the 93, 94, that sort of time space, and
Yeah.
I wasn't much older than you. I think you were like really young, 27 or something like that, doing that job, and I wasn't much older, and I landed the job of HR. I was the HR lead for Port of Durban,
Yeah,
and
wow.
so that was just a huge port. And so we were both in Durban, and then I just landed that job, and then that same month, the tragedy of Chris Hani happened, and so.
God.
And I am sure, I mean, I have so many drama and dramatic stories since then, the trade unions, I mean, that's where they had to fight, right? It was in the ports and so on. And it was a really tumultuous time. I look back at that and said that in terms of me personally, I've grown tremendously during that time because, I'm not an aggressive person in that sense, so I wasn't going to do all sorts of tactics and so on. And during that time anyway, things were changing so fast and
Yeah.
you had to keep the ports going. And I'm sure it was the same for you and the buses. You must have some interesting stories, especially in transport, because I remember, transport was a thing that was, sometimes targeted in terms of violent attacks and stuff like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what a time for us, Anton. And as you say, that Chris Hani assassination where everyone just held their breath and the country paused and we didn't know whether we were going to come right or wrong. And the leadership that brought us out of that was just truly incredible. And being so young and having to learn, in a lot of ways, I've put those experiences behind me. I remember early on in Australia being asked in an interview where they asked, like, tell me about a difficult situation that you managed in the past and how did you manage it? And so, and
Yeah.
I, in my naivety, I thought, oh, I'll give them a good one. So I told them about a time we were in an industrial dispute and I was pretty much held hostage by a whole lot of people with AK-47s. And then we negotiated our way out of it. And as I'm telling the story, I just watched the faces of the interview panel. They just shutting down, like they absolutely horrified by the story I'm telling them. And so the next time I'm in a similar situation and they say, tell us about a difficult situation, I go, Oh, I had the secretary and she stole some money, and it was like, yeah, what did you do about that? And so you've got
Yeah,
to put away some
yeah,
of those
no,
stories. They help form
oh,
us, but you
Yeah.
yeah,
can't tell that here. There's no
no,
context.
absolutely. The difference between really tough situations in Africa and Australia is slightly different, isn't it?
Oh, so much.
Yeah.
But equally, what we
So,
learned, Anton, and I'm sure you and I both went through this
Yeah.
kind of cauldron of
Yeah.
fire of you learn about respect and listening and
Mm.
being direct. And that still counts, right? And people are often surprised how much we pay attention to, I'm watching body language all the time. I'm listening carefully because when things would go wrong in South Africa, they went wrong and they went wrong
No, they
fast.
did, and it was a tough time. I mean, in the Durban port, there were 7 trade unions, 5,000,
Well,
6,000
yeah,
employees. But I think you're right. If I think about what did I learn there, I know it's not my podcast, but it's a good question. What did we learn? And I think a couple of things. But the one thing that stood out for me that I know I learned is stakeholder management. I know it's a big management word, but it's because we were in the ports, we were like what they called semi-government or anyway, whatever that was. But then, of course, when all the workers went on strike or blocked the ports or gates or whatever else, and the containers can't come out, and then, of course, the whole private sector of South Africa comes and visits you
yeah,
because they can't get their containers out. So, if Ben was working in manufacturing somewhere in South Africa, then he'd be there and say, well, I need my parts. And it was that stakeholder management. And there's a 32-year-old managing all of this. Yeah, it was a very formative time. And maybe, Jenny, maybe that's part of our resilience, right, that we have today.
oh, absolutely. And I think the other part, Anton, was, it's nice to think that we got there because we were smart or hardworking or something, but really we got there through the privilege that we had of our education and our upbringing in South Africa I was 27, 28 when I took over the bus company. And one of my shop stewards was the smartest, nicest guy I've ever met. And
Yeah.
this realization that it was just my luck that I was the CEO and he was the shop steward. And one of my joys was got him into an HR course, and the last I heard of him, he'd been appointed as an HR director. And that's where
Oh,
he should have
wonderful.
been all along. But that humbleness that comes from realizing we're only where we are by chance sometimes. It's yeah. And you still work hard. You still get what you need, but a little bit more humility got taught to us quite early. If you were at all arrogant early on as young as we were, walking into rooms with really grown up people that had done a really hard life, you learn some humility pretty quick.
I did. I had all these ships, these port ship captains, because they also belong to a trade union. And I was put in my place very quickly. 'cause- but it's right. I wanted to ask you this question, which is completely now different again from where we were. Um, when you grew up, I would imagine, or I would imagine that you had animals in the house. I mean, is that maybe where it started for you as a
So I,
kid?
yes, of course, I had animals. I had budgies, I had finches, I had birds, I had what do I have, hamster, guinea pigs, we had dogs. We never had cats. We almost had everything else, but not cats. But
Yeah.
I also grew up, but I think a lot of South Africans do, knowing animals are all around you. And
Yeah.
in my entire career, I started when I took over Joburg Zoo, I thought, look, we'll prove to everyone the zoo does this great work of helping people fall in love with animals. So we got some guys with clipboards and we went around and asked people, how much do you like animals on a 1 to 10? And everyone said 10. They hadn't even come in yet. So like it was a complete useless waste of time for two reasons. How we relate to animals says something about who we are as people. So people find it really hard to say, yeah, I actually hate animals, I abuse animals. No one's going to actually say that because it
Mm,
says
mm,
something
mm,
about you. Um, but in my time, how many people I've maybe met three or four people who say, I'm sorry, I just don't like animals. Most people like
mm.
some animal. They might not like them all. I probably am a more broad animal lover, but most people like animals at some level.
Yeah. But how, we got to the Johannesburg Zoo. So you go and do transport, and then you do some airlink, and then F&B. How did you get the Johannesburg Zoo job? I mean, how does that work?
I asked really, really nicely. So I was working in F&B at that stage, a little bit disillusioned. It was not a great fit for me. I was doing well. We were making lots of money for rich people, but it wasn't really the kind of, I'm a public servant somewhere deep in my bones. So it wasn't really working that well for me. And we went away and sat in the desert, and I made up a little list of these are the things I want to do when I leave the bank. And got back to Johannesburg and saw that the CEO of the zoo had resigned. And I thought, well, that looks like fun. And they've got really cool animals and it's close to where I live. And I was very well connected in the city. I was chairing the bus company at that stage. And so just pretty much put up my hand and went through 3 or 4 rounds of interviews, and they decided to take the chance on me, and I've never looked back. It's been such a great adventure and journey, and I knew nothing. The argument I made, and I think it's so important for young people, you don't have to lock into one career for your whole life. You actually are able to take the skill set you have and recast that. And especially when you move, I think that's really important. You might not find that job that you were able to do in the past. You might actually have to think about recasting your skills. So I was able to walk in and go, look, I don't know lots about animals, but I'm a civil engineer, so I can build infrastructure. I've worked in a bank, so I understand money. I've worked in transport, so I understand this model of how do you get people from A to B? How do I get it? It took me 6 months to stop saying how many passengers did we have this week? And they're like, they're not passengers, they're visitors. But it's the same model. The ticket
Yes,
I don't sell
yes.
today, I can't sell tomorrow. And so I was able to show them that I could bring this array of skills and apply it in a whole new way. And that's what's been super fun about moving into this world where there's lots of people who know about animals, but not many who have MBAs or background in engineering.
Yep. No, that's a good point. And I would like to hear your view on it, because I often also thought that in South Africa we were more allowed to be a generalist, and it's more about attitude than aptitude. Where my experience a little bit in Australia is you get pigeonholed a bit, and then if you say I want to go outside of that, you know, swimming lanes, the guys say no, you have to stay in your swimming lanes. It's not that easy to move around than we could, for instance, when I was young. So, to share my story, I studied a financial degree and did it for about 2 weeks, and then realized this is never going to work for me. But I love the operational side, manufacturing, making stuff,
Right.
seeing something tangible, seeing something produced. That was something. But I had the opportunity to do it where. I don't know if it's that easy. Yeah, I don't know how you saw it or how you experienced it.
I think you're right. And a lot of that is there's people with so much longevity here. And so when someone says, I want to change careers, and you're only going to have 2 years at it, but there's someone sitting right next to you with 20 years experience, who are they going to go for? And so that sometimes holds you back as well. Um, I've seen people switch, but it's difficult. And it is particularly in careers like my zookeepers, for example, you're competent within 2 years, and then for the rest of your career, you're pretty much going to do the same stuff every day. And that is very frustrating. And yet for them to change careers is very hard because they're already in that kind of, after 10 years, you kind of pretty much a zookeeper. And the good ones then study further and get a few extra skills and start trying things. But I think you're right. And a part of it is the recruitment process. What's good is to get into a biggish organization where there's a lot of opportunity to change, and then you can start getting that broader experience based
Yep.
on who you are and who you know. That really pays out here in Australia.
So Jenny, the time at Johannesburg Zoo. So you come from completely not a
Nothing.
you didn't study that and anything like that. So you had the
Right.
kind of a different kind of environment that you came in. So walking into that zoo, how did that feel, and what were the kind of first things you did in the first sort of here? What was the things that you wanted to change, or that you wanted to grow, or what was it like for you?
So you all know the Johannesburg Zoo, like your podcast
Yeah,
listeners. So the entrance off Jan Smuts. So you're coming along Jan Smuts Zoo Lakes across the road, and there's a little lay-by where the bus pulls in, and there's a really weird old rock structure like a tower.
yeah, yeah.
And inside that tower is the CEO's office. And you don't
Oh,
all know that. So my first day
yeah.
I go into that really weird round office. It's all brickwork. It's really weird. Quite cool. And it overlooks the flamingo enclosure. And the flamingos all run up and down squawking. And they just run one way and they all make a noise, and then they run the other way and they all make a noise. And after about 10 minutes, I said to the person who was briefing me, it's like, how do you work here? And they go, what are you talking about? I'm like, the noise. How can you work in here with that noise? And they looked at me blankly. And I swear 2 weeks later, I was doing that to other people because you just get used to it. But I had
Yes.
this really cool office overlooking the flamingos. I made it my business for the first month to say to people, don't tell me, show me. And we walked. We walked up and down the whole zoo. They showed me everything that was right and wrong. And then I asked them, what's the worst? What is the absolute worst thing in the zoo? There was a lot that we had to fix, but what's the worst? And every single person said the chimp enclosure. There was
Oh,
no disunity about that. Everyone said chimp enclosure. And then I talked to a couple of donors and to some of the guys in the government, and we got some money and we rebuilt a chimp enclosure. And that started a whole journey of rebuilding. I think by the end, we'd rebuilt a fair chunk of the zoo. It was one of these where you're rebuilding the whole place while still operating. And we either took off
yeah.
and flew or we were going to crash and burn. But it got better and better. And now the team that running the place are doing such a fabulous job as well. And it was about giving kids, we also ended up with this idea that it's about giving kids the best day of their life. That one day they don't remember where they live or what their parents do. They just stand in front of a
Mm.
magnificent creature like an elephant. And I had a couple of favorite spots. One was where you come around the corner and you see the elephants for the first time. And I'd wait, I'm like such a stalker. I'd wait there for the school kids. And they'd
Yeah,
come around the corner and then they stop and they breathe in as a group. They just do that collective like, and then they'd
yeah,
yell, elephant, and they'd run and they'd dance and they'd sing with joy. Just that unadulterated joy that comes from seeing incredible creatures. And it just kept reminding me, best day ever. That's what we delivered. When I came to Australia, that wasn't enough. A best day wasn't, people here have a great day most of the time. For us, it was this um, highly, highly endangered wildlife and the role that we should play in making good what has happened in this country. And so I've been able to shift the moral purpose as I go. But yeah, that first month in Joburg, the people I met, the things I was able to do, like the things we did with animals that we would never get away with in this country, it was fantastic.
yeah. I can imagine. What you also met your future husband then during that time, isn't it? I
Um,
think you
a
met.
little
I
bit
think you met
before
him in
that,
South Africa.
I
Yeah.
met him I actually met him in the Maldives diving. So
Okay.
he was Australian. He was traveling through Africa and had a week and booked a diving trip in the Maldives. And I had a week when I was down in Durban, and I booked a diving trip, and they put us at the singles table, and we dived together for the whole week. And yeah, that was that.
Yeah. You say that now, and I've been thinking about whether I should ask you this, but now I'm going to because it makes sense. So behind you is a book rack, and a book rack at the top shelf, there's a whole host of Lonely Planet books. So are you guys big travelers? Because I can see Japan and Mexico, and I don't know whatever else there.
Yeah, we're big travelers. That's just the old ones, right? The trophy Lonely
Yeah,
Planets. All
yeah,
the others are on the Kindle these days. But yeah, we
that's right.
travel a lot. We both love being in different places. We like to move. We like to do different things. Big travelers.
Yeah, yeah,
So, Jenny, as you know, our pod is a little bit about that Suitcase and Stranger's story. So tell us a little bit about your life and how does somebody in that position, which is obviously, I can hear in your voice, you know, you're really passionate about the place and really enjoyed it. So why and how did you decide to come over to Australia and start all over again?
Um, I think we really felt Richard's family was all here. I had permanent residence in Australia before we left because I was in a long-term relationship with him. We'd been coming back regularly and visiting the family and wanted to come here at some point. I also think, like many people, as you get older, there's some safety and security in coming to a country like Australia. And so we moved while we were still able to. In fairness, I was headhunted, and so I knew colleagues that were running the Zoos Victoria family while I was still the CEO of Johannesburg Zoo, and they reached out and said the guy at Werribee's leaving. Would you come and interview? So I did, and was successful. I had this unique opportunity of being able to keep working in Africa and live in Melbourne, which was just a dream. Um,
I
and every day
see.
there's a great part of the trail where you're walking through bulrushes and you hear the hardy-dars. I swear to God, it still
Okay.
catches me. And I look up and I know it's the soundscape. I know they pre-recorded birds, but I still look up almost every day when I hear that. Um, and so Ben, it was this combination of being prepared in the moment. Any of us who are married, you know that when the one person's ready to move, the other one isn't. And we managed to do that dance for a while, and it was just this perfect moment. We were both ready. We both were able to say, yes, this is a good time in our careers to move to Australia. And I got the job offer. That was just a dream to come out and run Werribee. And within a year, I was able to take over the CEO role.
So, and when you came here, obviously you had a little bit of a feel for Australia because obviously through your husband, but also you've visited here frequently. So it wasn't totally foreign like most of us who come down and don't even know where to drive and have never seen or been here. Um, how did you find the transition in terms of just the working environment, the differences, and what were the same and what were the major differences that you experienced?
Yeah, I think everyone should cut themselves some slack when you move country. It's hard. And anyone who tells you it's easy, I'm not sure how they've done it, but it's difficult. You leave behind a network. You know, I used to know the lawyer to phone. I used to know how to phone anyone in the media. You have to rebuild every every connection that you relied on, you rebuild, and that's hard and it takes time. Um, it's also deceptive just because we all speak English, we think we understand each other and we don't. And that surprised me over and over. I know Anton knows this, but one of the things I did do was get a coach straight away and say, okay, I'm coming into this leadership role. What do I need to know? How are people different? Because I knew that from my moving around South Africa as much as I did. And the first thing she said was, one, you have to smile more, and two, your accent's scary. And people, South Africans are a little bit intimidating because you're really direct. I've learned that I have to dial back my directness an enormous amount. I have to be gentler in how I talk to people. If I'm overstressed, I sometimes have to apologize a lot because I can be pretty direct and pretty clear on what I'm trying to ask for. And sometimes I go too far, and that's just part of knowing that I have to be really clear on how I communicate. So you soften and you change, and it's been a journey. I went back to uni when I got here. That helped a lot of learning in a different space. I worked hard on making friends. I built a new network altogether of who are the people I need to know. So let me go out and find them and be nice to them. But yeah, it's a trick. It's hard. And I don't know. I think we'd been here about 3 years and a friend came to visit and he said, how are you going? And we went, no, we're doing really great. And he went, no, no, you're not. You're still in. It takes longer than you think. And
Yeah.
then my other facetious joke is that I moved from Johannesburg to Melbourne, the most livable city in the world. Like, how hard is that ever going to be? And so when I was
Yes.
having one of those days where I was telling myself this was really hard, I'd just go for a walk in a park or, go watch the Australian Open or go to a free concert in your local park with a picnic with kids running around, and you start to have this, it's not that hard. There's a reason we came, and you just have to, you can control yourself and your own emotions. That's what you have to continuously work on. Does any of that
Yeah,
resonate with you guys? You're both
oh,
looking at me like crazy person.
no, no.
No, it's just, there's absolutely nothing more we can even add to that, because I think the one thing we found, and as Anton said, we're now episode 24 or thereabout, and that is the one consistent theme we got from every single guest that we had on our show. And that's the one thing we hear over and over. And it doesn't matter where you get headhunted as a CEO or whether you come in with nothing behind you as a backpacker with no money. That transition is very, very hard. And I suppose the thing I wanted to ask is, okay, so for you then, what was, Anton always frames it as, what was in your suitcase that you brought with you, and what was in your suitcase that you left behind because you couldn't pack everything? So you already talked about the infrastructure and the people helping you. What else was it that you left behind that you really missed there?
Oh man, you leave behind people. And then the phone call once a week doesn't make a difference, right? And I think of just the joy of people who used to just drop into my house. They didn't phone or anything. They just show up with a bottle of wine and come for dinner, whether I liked it or not. No one's doing that when you get this side of the world. And so leaving people behind, leaving animals behind, I still miss that ability to go to a game reserve just because you feel like it. So, and that network of people, I feel I really left that behind. I think if I think about what I brought with, I love that your logo, the little man, has a wheelie bag because it's heavy, right? What you bring in that bag is heavy. And it's your history, it's your knowledge, it's who you are. This incredible gift we had of being managers in our early 30s, of working with people who were so different. I walk through the office and I say good morning to everyone. Australians don't do that. You just come in and sit at your desk and start working. But in Joburg, if you came into the office and didn't say hello, it was an incident. You didn't like someone, like your safety is in the network around you, so you work hard on it all the time. And I think the other thing I packed in my suitcase is I like suitcases. I went traveling for 6 months recently, and I had an organizing system that you would be proud of, Ben. The manufacturer, and you would just love it. Like I could open it and find the T-shirt I wanted. But that suitcase is
Ben wants that one too. Yeah.
oh man, it was good. Like I packed like a demon. But the point being that if you love change, you have to be ready. You have to take your suitcase, but with you, travel light. Don't take too much baggage with you. I'm not sure that analogy works, but I feel like I brought a lot of love
works very
and a
well.
lot of knowledge. But if you're not careful, that bag gets heavy.
Yeah, and I think the other analogy or other point here is that you do take yourself with you. You do not leave yourself in South Africa. You bring whoever you are here. But you're right. I mean, it's an interesting thing. We were having this conversation that you're having with us now more than a year ago, Ben and I, and maybe with some other people, and then we just had the conversation, and then we said, well, we want more of those conversations. And so a year later, we've now had 24. And the thing is this is our privilege now. It's incredibly privileged for us because we're hearing these stories, and it's almost like we've got a bit of a fan base now, and people are really enjoying it, and they're saying to us, wow, I wish it was here when, we wish you did that when I came across. And I think this is the thing. To your point of sitting around the fire, because that's probably what you miss as well, in South Africa. You can sit around a campfire, and tell stories. It's like this. For me personally, what I miss a lot, I brought in my suitcase all my, my camera gear because I love photography. And so I had to now resort to take photos just basically of birds, and they're beautiful. I mean, there's nothing like that in South Africa that you find here again. It is. Bird photography is extremely hard because you can't get close. But I miss, the big animals, right? And I miss that a lot because that is just extraordinary going into their environment. You still can find places that are not overpopulated and over tourist and whatever else. Yeah, and I'm sure that's something that you miss too, right? The big animals.
Yeah, I think also part of the small light suitcase, the little guy that the guy has, is not to bring too much in your bag. You've made the choice to move. And so I've tried very hard not to talk about, I get in trouble at work for this one, but talking about what we did in the past, what we did in South Africa, what I miss. I try to substitute that with the stuff here that's really good. But I can't resist, they'll tell you some shocking story, and I've got one that's 10 times worse. I can always like outstory them on something. But when you say that, like you miss the animals, it just takes a bit longer. Right now, there's a kangaroo out on my lawn out there, and that's like spectacular. And at night, there's wombats down the other side, and
That's
and
right.
going and finding them. I love riding on public transport here. The train works, the trams work. And so finding the stuff that I wouldn't have said I valued a lot in South Africa, but I value it a lot here. And so not trying to down substitute, but to really change into something new and enjoy it. So my suitcase is light, I think.
Yep.
And perhaps
And can I
also
just
then,
also, sorry, Anton, I'm
uh,
gonna
uh,
just one last suitcase
go,
story. Living in
go
a
for it, Jenny.
bushfire zone in Australia is a really stupid idea, but we do it. And it's a beautiful area. But it makes you chase this idea of if you could lose everything tomorrow, what would you take with you? Because on
Yeah.
an extreme fire day where I live up in the mountains around Melbourne, I have to leave home with the understanding that I might not have a home to come back to. And I walked through my house this week looking, and I took maybe three things. These are just things, right? And we get over attached to all of them. And it is an interesting exercise when you have to face that thought of if I had nothing. When you put all your stuff on that shipping container and you all had it, that momentary thought of what if that container sinks? And do you have a sense of, oh, thank goodness, I'll get new clothes? Or do you feel that that would be a devastating loss? And I think this is the choices we make when we move.
Yeah. Yeah, on that one, we've had that a few times. So for me, one of the things when Anton and I started the pod, we spoke about, gee, I said to Anton, I wish somebody told me not to bring my container.
Oh,
Because all
yeah,
I
I
brought
wish.
over is just a lot of crap, and I paid a lot for it, and we just threw it away. And the plugs didn't even fit, so we had to go and get new stuff. And I thought that was just a waste. And then I spoke to another friend of us and somebody on the pod, and they said they came over, and it felt really foreign. But then their container arrived with all their stuff. And they put it in their house, and they said it was like Christmas. It was just
Yes,
opening up all these things, and everything was a present and new to them, and they really appreciated it. And that made me think, oh, well, maybe there's some merit. So there's not a wrong and right in anything in life, is there? Or they are probably on a few things. But when it comes to these things, it's a personal thing. For some people, one thing worked. For the
absolutely.
other people, something else totally works.
And I
Yeah.
think also that I agree with you. I wished I'd been told don't bring as much stuff because your house won't be as big. Um, and we did change over time, but it would have been so expensive to buy everything. The actual act of replacing an entire household full of stuff, geez, that would have cost a lot. So, yeah, I'm glad we brought a lot of it, and we had the Christmas moment, opening those containers that you haven't seen for years. Um, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, it is. I want to I think that it probably really important that we talk a little bit about the work that you do in Victoria Zoo or Zoos Victoria. It's about, planting a tree that you'll never sit under, right? It's that kind of thing. So tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about the work that you do and your people with Zoos Victoria, and what is it that you would want to achieve through this?
So when I took over as CEO right at that moment, there was a scientist who'd done a whole lot of work with bats, and she'd identified a very small bat, a Christmas Island pipistrelle, that was in a lot of trouble on Christmas Island. And basically, an invasive ant species was killing these little bats. And every night the bats would come back to the same roost space, and this big ant called crazy yellow ants were killing them. And she had plotted the population, and if you put a line through it, you could see we would lose this population somewhere around the end of 2009. And the government responded in early 2009. They put out a tender. There was only one tenderer, which was a coalition of zoos. We worked together. We put a submission in. We negotiated with the government, and we finally put a team on the ground in August 2009. Their first job, we took the lead on the bats. The Perth Zoo took the lead on lizards, and Taronga Zoo were involved as well. And we tried to catch some bats. Put recording devices right across the range and realized pretty quick that the two people who were there, they were recording one bat. And they recorded that one bat for 5 days in which they tried to catch it. And then they never recorded it again. We literally arrived in time to record an extinction event. And we never heard it again. They stayed for another 5 weeks and the bat was gone. And that moment in time changed our trajectory as an organization, because we said, this is crazy. Why are we waiting for someone to tell us animals are in trouble? Why are we waiting for someone else to pay? Why didn't we go in February when there were 100 bats? Why did we wait? And we then made this promise that no Victorian terrestrial vertebrate species will go extinct on our watch. And that has changed everything we do. We sent back out our scientists and said, come and tell us what's in trouble. And they came back with 20 species that if we did nothing would go extinct. And that was in 2009. We then increased it. We got up as far as 27. We keep watching them and see who's getting better and worse. Here's the good news. The criteria we used then was, what would we lose in 5 years if we do nothing? And that's what gave us the first 20. It's now 16 years later. We haven't lost one. In fact, most of them are doing so well now that we're able to move away from some of the work we're doing. And for each species, we do something different, because for each species, there's a different threat. But I could probably, if you gave me more time, run through most of the 27 and tell you what we've done and why.
Well, which is your favorite one? Which is your favorite one, if I may ask that?
That's not fair, because I pretty much love them all.
I know, it's asking who's your favorite child, right? It's the same question, but...
Well, let me give you one that I talk about a lot at the moment. The Victorian grassland earless dragon. It's a tiny lizard. They were extinct we thought they were extinct in Victoria. We hadn't seen them for 54 years. And that wasn't because we weren't trying. Every year we paid for surveys. We kept sending people out. And every year some smart person would say to me, this is the one you're going to lose. You said you won't lose a species on your watch. You haven't seen it. I'm like, they went extinct 50 years ago. I'm not going to be held accountable for that. But anyway, we kept looking. And then about 3 years ago, 2022, they were doing some pre-development surveys out in the west of Melbourne. These two young scientists pick up a lizard and go, this is a really weird lizard. Take a picture, let it go, send us the picture, and my team lose their minds. A species that hasn't been seen for 54 years has just been seen by two people who don't know what it is, and they've sent us a picture. And so within the matter of a week, we had permits, we got out there, we collected some. We now have close on 200 in our breeding facility. We've gone from a species no one had seen to a species that's well on its way to recovery. And that's what's so exciting about what we do, is it's full of ups and downs. It's full of terrible moments we think we won't get it right, and then we get a breakthrough, and suddenly it's an incredibly exciting story. And with each and every one of the species, there's these kind of real moments of success and joyfulness where we can celebrate. Yeah. And so that's what we do, is we work with 27 critically endangered species. On the other side, we work with inspiring little children to take action that makes a difference. And they do such cool stuff. They make cookies and sell them. They wash cars. They raise funds. Right now we have bushfires burning and kids are raising funds to look after wildlife. Little kids know we need to do this, and they really want to do it. And we're just there to try and enable that and make it work.
Yeah, so you've really taken the view, obviously, it's very obvious about the type of person that you are, because you've taken the view that it is critically important that we look after the animals, make sure they don't get extinct. But I think your primary thing here is get people involved in this as much as you can, as many as you can, because if you can do both of those things, then you're not the lone scientist out there trying to save something. Then you've got a whole community of so many people trying to do that, right?
Absolutely. It takes a world to save species, and we work with really little things often. But as soon as you go to the bigger animals that are broad and wide ranging, it gets way harder. It's hard enough to re-release a critically endangered species like eastern barred bandicoots back into a habitat. Imagine releasing cheetahs or lions. It's easy to say you should live with these animals. They're hard to live with, some of them. But I come back to what you're saying there, Anton. I think there's a responsibility we all have to live in a diverse planet. And some of that's about compassion for each other and compassion for other animals. How do you make the space that the kangaroo can come and eat my lawn? I don't care. How do you make space that we can keep sharing, that we don't need to take everything for ourselves? And that's what really is important about our future, that we stop thinking in scarcity and fighting each other for little patches. How do we act with generosity?
Yeah, you're right. I think about you're quite right. I mean, we're so privileged here where I live. So we've got a breeding pair of tawny frogmouths,
Oh,
and
lovely.
we've seen them, producing chicks 3 years in a row now. I've got the
Look,
most
come on,
beautiful.
Anton. Sorry, I'm going to stop you there, Anton. As a wildlife photographer, if you're not sending me pictures of your tawny chicks, because that's the
I
goofiest creature ever created, right?
No, I've got the most beautiful. I'll send you a few. I've got the most beautiful one, and then we've got a breeding pair of magpies, and then we've got all the noisy miners, and I never knew, and I mean I was oblivious to this. You see birds, you grow up with birds in South Africa, the mossy or whatever. You just think they're random, but you come here, and I live in this garden that we have, lots of trees, and it's a fair size, and then you suddenly realize that this is their area. They live here. This is who they are. It's the same ones, and so it's not different ones, and so you've got these several breeding pairs, and I've got the most beautiful photograph of shot it over a period of time of the magpie chicks that were born. So it has kept me busy. So yes, I think that getting people involved in this sort of thing, because maybe it goes back to the part that you said, well, I went into the zoo and asked them who loves animals, and I would do a survey, and it's all 10 out of 10. And I think it's the same thing. You don't have to teach people to love animals. You just got to give them exposure to it, right?
And you just have to teach them to respect. Like we're starting to learn so much, like with recordings that can separate out. When we go out to do a survey in the field now, you know how hard it is to find birds in this landscape. We take an auditory recording and then AI can sift it apart and tell you what 27 birds are living in this area. You can use,
Oh, of
I mean,
course.
it's insane, right? And you
Yeah,
can
of
use
course.
eDNA. You can take a sample of water and it can tell you whether there's platypus in that body of water. There's so much we're learning now about where animals are, but we're also learning about their languages. And that warbly noise that magpies make, where they're just like,
Yeah,
ooh, ooh,
yes, yes,
they're
yes, yes, yes.
practicing. That's not a communication. That's them singing to themselves as they
Ah,
practice and get their voice boxes stronger. There's the dawn chorus in Australia has meaning, and they're starting to now tease that apart because we hear it as a symphony. We can't hear what each individual bird is saying to the neighbors. But once people start unpacking it, they're starting to decipher these whole lives going on all around us.
yeah, that is amazing. I never thought that. You're right. I mean, you hear the magpie. They're so special, and you hear that warbling noise, and now I'm thinking about the birds in my garden. There's a noisy miner that's got a half a beak, and him or her has been around for almost 3 years now, and it's kind of became our buddy, right? So
Yeah.
we know them, and you can see them, you can differentiate them. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
So listen, you two, I think you can go on for a few hours talking about all the animals and your shared experiences. So
Come on,
I
Ben, you haven't
do
told us your favorite yet. Come on, what's your favorite
now.
animal?
I want to make this about. I will get back to it, but I want to make this about you, Jenny, and because I know you won't mention it if we don't drag it out of you. But I did see the OA behind your name, and this pod is very much about you as well. So that's a rare and fantastic achievement. So Give us a little bit more insight and info around that, and how did that come about, and how do
Yeah,
you feel about it?
I felt incredibly humbled and privileged. Honestly, Ben, what a great thing. I a few years ago got a public service medal on the Australia Day Honours, and that's in a way almost rarer. They're given to public servants, and that was a really lovely recognition of the fact that I work within government structures, and have for a long time. I'm probably one of the longest serving CEOs within the public service down here in Victoria. And then being nominated, it's a secret process. You get nominated by your peers, and there's a very rigorous referencing process that I often partake in, referencing other people. And suddenly being in the room and being presented the award, I found it very emotional. As a migrant, to get that recognition seemed very special. That and over and above that, once it's published, my phone rang hot, and I had this moment of I actually have a network now. After 20 years 18 years in Australia, hundreds of people made this possible. I didn't get the award on my own. I got the award because so many people are part of my network. And
Yeah,
and
but I
just
mean,
you've arrived, right? But Anton,
right. I
it's
mean,
true. You find you have a
yes.
network.
Well, exactly. And but I think from what I understand from a previous guest that we had, Dr. Manny Paul, and he explained it as well, like you did. But the one thing he said, yeah, it's the community who nominates you, right? And so, going back to the thing, coming here as a South African and making all the mistakes, and then building your community, and then you're being awarded in Australia for this work, but it is the community who recognizes it. It's not
Yeah, so
a panel
special.
of four people, right? Yeah.
So special. And knowing, yeah, that moment of somebody took all that effort. Like, it's not easy to nominate someone. And
Yeah.
people cared enough to do all that paperwork for me. It really felt incredibly privileged.
Yeah. But
But it's also validates just things that you do, and that you're on the right track, and that it gets recognized. And I think, again, moving countries, it's not always easy. You don't always that easy to read everybody over here. Sometimes you don't know if you're doing a good job, or if it's actually
Yeah.
seen by anybody. And so to get something like that, I think is fantastic. As you say, as an immigrant, to receive that must be even more difficult. And so I think you can be very, very proud of yourself, and it's a fantastic achievement.
Thank you.
yeah,
Appreciate that.
yes, no, it is unbelievable. So Jenny, that's the point where I say we've sort of rushed through this thing. It feels like 5 minutes talking, and so here we are. Yeah, it's been, Ben is quite right. It's very hard when you find somebody on the other side that has a passion that I in my little bit also share, but to talk to somebody that is so passionate about what they do, and it is hard to capture that in an hour or a little bit of an hour and stuff like that. And it's been just an extraordinary conversation. And we can talk for another hour about all the work that you're doing, and the future and so on. But maybe we talked about that a little bit, but the people that listen to our podcast, and younger people that also want to achieve something and go forward, and looking up to you as a role model. And I mean, you're a woman, right? And so you're in it's already, you it's harder. There's no question about it. And then you come here, you do all these things. What is your kind of advice for young people if they want to follow their passion? What are the things that they need to do?
I think, the world's different from where we grew up. I grew up at a stage where being a woman actually worked a lot for me.
Yeah.
People would say, "Oh, you're just going to be a token." I'm like, "Sure, make me a token. But trust me, when I get in, you're going to be sorry you thought I was a token, because I want to do a really, really good job. And if there's an
Yeah.
advantage to be taken, I'll take it."
Yes.
I'd say to young people, work hard and take whatever opportunity you can get. When someone says, "Do you want to work the early shifts say yes, because you don't know why that early shift is better. It's always going to be an easier path, but that's not where the great glory is. The glory is in the hard roads. And so working hard is important. Study as much as you can get away with or as much as you can tolerate. I would do that. Learn every day wherever you can, and take opportunities. My career early on, you describe it, it wasn't a strategic, well thought out process. It was me going, wow, that looks fun. Let's go do that for a bit. And then it was fun. And then another opportunity came. And this really diverse career that I built myself early on, I often wondered what happens if you stay put later. And then I did. And then I got awards. So that was fantastic. Maybe I should have stayed put earlier. But then I would still be running a bus company in Durban.
Yeah.
And so this just opening up for opportunity and being brave and do that outside of your career as well, because I think it comes in. Like, I love doing things like diving and walking and hiking and staying fit and staying in shape. There's all these things that we just need to keep getting off the sofa and going and doing. And while you're young, do as much of that as you can. Go hitchhike in Europe for a month. It's good for you to do these things. It's good for you to lose all your stuff one day on the tram because you forgot to take it home. It'll make you stronger. The other day I was up in Sydney. We were coming all the way back from Colombia, and it turned into a multiple day epic, which is irrelevant. But the story was that the very last flight was after 3 delays and changed flights. I had to get from Sydney to Melbourne, and they cancelled our flight, and it was the last flight out of the night. And we just sat and waited for them to give us something else. But there were people crying in the airport because their flight was cancelled. You need to go and experience this so you get past that point. Because if the first hardship sets you back that far, you won't do it again. You've got to build your resilience. And that's what I'd be teaching young people. Go play sports you lose at. Go do things you're bad at. You have to learn to lose. You have to learn to take chances, and you have to learn to be resilient. It's really important.
Well, it's just, you're right. As Ben would say, there's nothing I can say now. It's just this, you're right. But all of these things that you say is true. You've experienced all of them. I have no doubt you've lost and forgot everything on the tram. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't say that. And you, and so that's true. And you're right. I think that if you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to learn. You're not going to experience adversity. You're not going to find out that this was the wrong decision and I know how to make it next time. And you're not going to know any of those things. And you're right. But you're an extremely great example of somebody that goes and does exactly what you say you believe in. And so, and it's such an important role that you're playing in Victoria at the moment. And, for my, everybody on the podcast who listen to this podcast knows I've now got a grandson. He's now almost 9 months old. It's the first generation van der Walt now in Australia. And I want him also to go to Zoos Victoria and go and experience all of those things and see some of those animals that there's a board written to say, 40 years ago we saved this little lizard from extinction, and here he is today. That would be the reward, wouldn't it be?
That would absolutely. And Anton, passing this passion on to the next generation, what a joy that will be.
Yes. Any last thoughts from you, Ben?
I wanted to say thank you very much. We really, really appreciate your time. We know you're busy woman. You've got lots of things on, but you made time for us, and we really appreciate it. We also appreciate that you just shared so honestly and open with us and shared a little bit about your life with us. And yeah, once again, just congratulations for what you're achieving. Keep on going. There's still a lot to do, so like we all know. And as you say, it's all about perceptions and behaviors and becoming a bit more aware of the situation out there and what's really happening. So, yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jenny. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys, and keep doing the amazing work. I think sharing stories is what gives us all joy and hope. And so thank you for the work you do as well.